Let me check my bank to make sure my appearance fee showed up real quick before I go any further.
Northside Nate joining us here on NFC Now. What's up, Nate? Happy Monday.
Yeah, you too, man. You too.
How much is the appearance fee?
It's not much.
Okay. I just want to thank you for your help at boxing a couple weeks ago with the ring corners. So this is my thank you to you. You discovering the blue and red corners. I got you on the podcast to thank you for that and talk about what you see and how you help us out so much.
Yeah.
So,
I think
we talked about earlier. I don't know if you listened to the whole show, but the first thing we talked about, the first guest, Jimmy Neely, was talking about how you judge fights. And I told him one time there was a trainer at Octopus that you and I were there together, and the trainer was arguing with us about he felt he got robbed in a fight. It was a Muay Thai or a kickboxing fight. And I said to him, have you ever talked to Nate or Blake about how you score a fight? And he said, no, it's the same. He either said it's the same as MMA, or he said it goes like IKF, the number of kicks you land and this and that. And I told him, no, it's not. And I think I brought you in from the other room, and I said, Nate, would you talk to this guy? And I remember you sat him down and you told him this is how we score the fight. So if you wouldn't mind, tell people that how you score MMA and how you score kickboxing, they're different or similar.
Yeah, so MMA, the number one criteria really is damage, okay? And, if you look on the unified rules, the ABC rules, the number one thing we look for in judges is damage, how much damage is inflicted. If I hit you with 5 jabs and you land a really hard right, it kind of wobbles me a little bit, makes me step back. In that case, you would be ahead on the card. You know what I mean? So it's really all about damage first, then efficiency, right? So it's effectiveness and then efficiency is judged second.
What does efficiency mean? I mean, effectiveness is who beat the shit out of who in that round.
Yeah, effectiveness is the power of the punches. How hard are you getting hit? How hard are you getting kicked? Efficiency is how many times are you getting hit? How many times are you getting kicked? So efficiency is judged behind effectiveness.
And then what's the third?
The third is, it depends on where the fight takes place, whether it's standing or on the ground. So obviously, if it's on the ground, you're going to weigh Ju-jitsu, right? So more than half of the round, the majority of the round, right? So it's a 5-minute fight. 3 minutes of the fight is judged on the ground, and you're going to judge what happened on the ground, right? Unless there was, somebody got dropped or something amazing happened. But for the most part, it's pretty easy to judge a fight. And really the key is judging it minute by minute. If you can judge a fight minute by minute, you should be able to tell who won that fight.
And that's for MMA and we'll call kickboxing and Muay Thai the same thing for arguments. Is kickboxing and Muay Thai different than MMA?
Yeah, absolutely. So damage is still going to be the ultimate criteria no matter what, right? That's why you get a 10-8, 10-7 for knockdown. So obviously if you knock your opponent down in a Muay Thai fight, it changes the scorecards automatically. It's 10-8, 10-7. But, in Muay Thai and kickboxing, you do judge, you should judge kicks heavier, right? Because it is a kicking sport, as well as you can count defense, whereas you can't count defense in MMA. There's no reward for defense in MMA. Your reward is not getting knocked out or submitted. So at least you can judge effective blocking and effective defense in Muay Thai and kickboxing.
So I think I've heard someone else explain that before in kickboxing. If I'm fighting you and I'm kicking you a lot of times, that expends more energy.
Well, you wouldn't be able to kick me, but
let's make believe I could actually lift my head up to 6 feet, my foot up to 6 feet high. If I'm trying to land numerous kicks to your head and you're just blocking all of them, basically I'm just wasting my time and wasting my energy, and you're actually getting a positive effect out of that from the judge's standpoint.
Yes and no. If I'm just going like this and blocking kicks that are potentially hurting my arm, it really adds to the defense of how am I defending it? Am I catching the kick? Am I doing proper defenses? So, I mean, that does matter in Muay Thai and kickboxing, whereas it does not in MMA. You get absolutely nothing in MMA.
Interesting. Again, ladies and gentlemen, Northside Nate Mann joining us here on NFC Now. I was doing some digging on Facebook, man. Saw a picture of David Oblas and Nate Mann on a couch together in 2013. How far does this friendship go?
Hold on, which couch? Because we never did a dirty movie, so I don't know what couch.
Yeah,
you're
well,
talking
yeah.
about.
As I was saying that, I was like, "Yo, I probably need to explain what they was doing." It looked like a couple guys watching the UFC fight. Y'all wasn't
Was
doing
it-
no
yeah,
funny business.
that
It
was
was
the,
touch
was the
cut.
Black Plague on that one?
Yeah, that
The
was
Black
James
Plague?
Thorpe and
Yeah.
Tom Wynn and Non Wynn. So I trained with those guys way back in the day. Probably I started training with them in 2002. Maybe James Thorpe, the Black Plague, was a undefeated MMA fighter. He used to kick the hell out of me. He had a UFC party at his house back in 2012, and we ended up there. And so yeah, I've known David for a little while. He drugged me out with Kyle Maynard to Alabama. That was the worst experience of my life. Still traumatized
Me
from
too.
that. So.
And we were talking earlier about how you go from starting out to being a referee. We talked to Jason Collins about that, Jimmy Neely, Jeff Kemp. What was your experience from starting out in MMA, who you started out for, to now being Northside Nate Mann?
So I started out training with MMA. I started training with a guy named, Ken Coffey. He was a judge for a while, James Thorpe. Just fell in love with MMA, so I wanted to be involved in it. I helped Ken promote shows outside of Atlanta for a little while called Extreme Freestyle Fighting. So I did a little bit of promoting back in the day. When that failed, I inherited a bunch of gloves because we had absolutely nothing to do with them. So then I started renting them out. Ken gave me the gloves as a payment because obviously I didn't make a lot of money promoting. So I started renting those gloves out. So I started out as the glove guy, just handing out gloves at fights, getting licenses, and then I went to inspector. I think I was an inspector for 4 or 5 years. I started judging, and then Matt Woodruff and Blake Grice gave me a chance to be a referee, and I jumped on the occasion and did pretty well at it. So I was able to continue. Probably 10, 12 years ago. I mean, it's been a while.
Yeah, man. So you've been doing this for 10, 12 years. I've seen you at every NFC event, man. Like Northside Nate is associated with NFC in my head. What does I asked you about you and David's friendship earlier, but what does you and David's friendship and the NFC mean to you?
I'm not friends with David right now.
I agree.
He's kind of a jerk, man. So I can't really be friends with Oblas right now. He's a habitual line stepper. So if you know anything about David, he is definitely a habitual line stepper, and it's just hard to be his friend.
How about the NFC, or is the NFC too associated with Dave for us to say anything nice about the NFC?
It's pretty hard. It's pretty tough to say anything about the NFC, but I will say that they're consistent and they do give you a platform to work on. I mean, without the NFC, it would be hard for me to be able to ref, and to be able to do what I enjoy, because they are so consistent in Atlanta, and they are one of the top promotions in the Southeast. So they do give a consistent platform to people to get better on.
Did I ever rent gloves from you when you were renting them? I don't remember back then if I did or not.
Yeah, you did.
Okay. And then I mentioned earlier, I think when Jeff Kemper's on, because he's still a timekeeper, judge, and ref. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think you're the only one that refs MMA, kickboxing, and Muay Thai, NFC Jiu-Jitsu, and boxing. I don't think any of these other guys cross over to boxing.
Yeah, so I'm currently I do professional boxing in Georgia. I do IBJJF, Jiu-Jitsu tournaments all around the U.S. I go to Texas. I go to Tennessee. I've gone to Vegas to do Master Worlds for the IBJJF Jiu-Jitsu tournaments, and then obviously MMA.
Jason Collins brought up earlier the diminished spirit aspect of what you're seeing when you're in there, and you are the third person in the cage. Decisions happen quick. You're having to make decisions that are that people they may criticize because it's just in the moment, man. What does that feel like when you're there, and what does the diminished spirit look like exactly?
So if you play Tekken or Street Fighter, the little bar that goes consistently down as you're getting your ass kicked, right? I mean, your guy gets slower. It's harder for him to throw punches. It's harder for him to defend. I mean, it's kind of like that. You can just see it in people's eyes. And you can see when they want a way out. Obviously they're overwhelmed, but I mean, they're tired. It's they can't keep their hands up. They're taking too much punishment. They're slower. You could tell in their walk, the way they react to if the fighter backs away, how they react to that fight. Then you know what I mean. So there's a lot of things that I look for: the way they walk, the way they're stepping, the way they look. I'm big on going to the corners in between rounds because I want to see how they're talking to their coach, how they're reacting to their coach, and what they're saying. That's a big indication that tells me if they're diminished or you know what I mean. So I need to keep a closer eye if they're having a hard time keeping that discussion with their coach.
What are you looking to hear when you do go into the corner? Because I actually do appreciate you going in and just kind of just checking the temperature in certain corners.
Just the same thing we're doing now, coherent, question response. Like if they're saying something, how they're responding to their coach, how they look, are they slumped over in their chair? Because there was somebody that died in a kickboxing fight one time because they just weren't paying attention. So that's a big indication of when somebody's in the corner, their heartbeat can come down for a second. How are they reacting then? How do they look?
A lot of times in MMA, it seems like people are too prideful to throw that white flag in the cage. Man, what are your thoughts on it? Do you hope to see more people do that, or are you okay with it?
Man, to be honest with you, if it reaches that point, I don't think I've done my job as a referee. If the corner kind of has to throw the towel, like I get there's certain circumstances, they know their fighter better than I do. But at the end of the day, man, like it's my job as a ref to make sure these fighters go home safe. They can fight next week if they want to. They don't take a career-ending injury or brain trauma at a local show where they're just kind of getting their feet wet.
I've got a dumb question because I don't know all the rules. Can a corner stop a fight in an MMA fight? Like in boxing, you see them physically throw the white towel into the ring at the referee. Can the corner stop the fight in an MMA fight, and how do they make you realize they are?
So absolutely, the corner can stop the fight whenever they would like to. What they would need to do is just get their towel, stand up on the apron, and just wave the towel. They have inspectors that sit right by them that can get our attention. Our chief officials do a great job of looking at what's going on ringside. So I mean, obviously we would see it. So yeah, they definitely can stop the fight.
Has there been a time where you felt like you took a little too long to stop a fight or stop the fight a little prematurely?
It's tough to say, man. I'm a habitual overanalyzer. So I ref these fights. I go back and see what mistakes I made. If I made mistakes, I habitually analyze these fights and overthink them. But it's tough to really pinpoint. But I mean, obviously I've gone and be like, man, like, after you stop it, you're like, he kind of jumped up quick, or he's reacting a little different than I thought. So I mean, there's always in that mind where I think about things and analyze how to do better. You know what I mean?
You're one of the few that I've ever seen actually go out and defend yourself. Like, hey, I know this was in question, but let me just go ahead and present the facts on this one.
Yeah.
Why do you feel the need to do that?
A lot of times I feel like people just might have their own idea of things, or if I can look at the rules and try to educate people, or just say, hey, based on these rules, these are why I reacted, then I think that's okay for me to do at times. It's not okay for me to do my opinion on things. But if I could say, hey, according to these ABC rules or according to the Georgia State rules, this is what happened, and try to educate people, because believe it or not, I don't like to be hated. I mean, I get a lot of hate sometimes because I do a thing where there's a lot of ego, there's a lot of pride in MMA. I mean, that's a tough thing to do for people to get in the cage and put everything in the line in a fist fight. You know what I mean? And for me to stop that fight, that's a lot of pressure on me. So if I can say, hey, this is why I did it according to these rules, man, I'm more than happy to do that. And if they, they could either choose to say, oh, okay, or say, man, like F Nate, either way, I try to do things based on the rule.
First, I'll say F Nate, but then I will throw a question up that someone else asked that I was thinking about. How do you feel about the ending of the Lewis Brewington fight? And I was going to ask about that earlier because that was one of the most
was too. That was we was working to that one. We was working to that one, Nate. We was working.
Well,
so tell us what you saw from your eyes, because we've seen it 1,000 times in video.
He's a very animated character, and I know he was hyped up for the fight, and there was a lot going on in the fight, pre-fight and in the fight. But I mean, it is what it is. Like they got a little bit out of hand. I kind of took him down, and he said, "All right, Nate, all right, I'm cool," and then that was it. So, I mean, he's just an animated character, and it just is what it is at that point.
From my perspective, he is a very animated character. And I think, again, as I've told David, as I told him, this is good for the NFC. We need animated characters, man. It seemed like in that moment, he stood over him. There was a lot of conversation because I did an interview with him following. And there was a lot of conversation about him standing over him and basically essentially shooting, like putting one in his head. Do you feel like in that moment you could have stepped in earlier? Or like, what is that line when it comes to you in celebration of the other fighters? Because I've seen there was another fight where like a fighter, like I think maybe like flicked the guy off after something happened and like you pushed him off and it was an aggressive thing. What's that line for you in like judging sportsmanship versus just, stopping a fight?
So I'm a very old school guy. I mean, I used to watch Tito Ortiz literally like be in the middle of the ring and fake drag his opponent out and dig a grave in the middle of the ring and put his opponent in it. So, I mean, like I'm very old school when it comes to MMA and things like that. So, I mean, like I said, MMA, it takes a lot of guts and just, it takes a lot to get in that ring and get in a fist fight with somebody. So if you want to do a little celebration for a couple seconds after you win a fist fight with another grown man trying to kill you, like, so be it. A lot of training goes into that. I mean, these guys train for months and months. Like, if they want to do a little celebration where I didn't think that was anything that bad, because he's done it in previous fights, people didn't get upset. But there was just a lot of heat on that fight. So
the aftermath was crazy. That was one of the best moments in my short NFC career, man. Just like being witness to, you intervening the second time around, man. Like, have you ever been a part of that type of fiasco at the end of a fight?
Not in the ring. There's been a few fights out of the ring, like Waller said. I think Matthew Waller got punched in the face that night by one of Wesley's people. And I mean, there's obviously been fights in the crowd that we've had to break up, especially at some boxing fights. But some fights get good like that, and I mean, that's what sells and builds up MMA as a whole. Like people still talk about that to this day. So I mean, sometimes that's needed.
Absolutely. Again, ladies and gentlemen, Northside Nate Mann joining us here on NFC Now. Northside Nate, I will say you are, to me, the Herb Dean of the NFC, man. Like you're always there. You're at all events, and it's just consistently you. Like you're your own character, Northside Nate Mann. Like you can't miss you. And so, on behalf of the entire NFC community, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so, man. It's a team that makes it work. I mean, I've just been very fortunate in learning from good people. I learned a lot from Blake. I learned a lot from Jeff. I always try to learn, but I wouldn't say I'm any character. I'm just there to do a job, and I really enjoy refereeing. I want to be at every show. I want to referee. I really love it, but I don't think I'm a character by any means. It takes the whole team,
Hold on. So Waller just chimed in and said, wait, did you just say sometimes it's needed that I get punched?
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm saying sometimes that excitement in the fight is what's needed to sell future fights. That excitement in the fights, is what builds fighters up sometimes. Absolutely, Waller does not need to be punched, but he did get punched a couple times that night.
I think Nate needs to be punched a few times at fights, but I'll say even with the Lewis Brewington, from my aspect, what happened afterwards, when he did the standing gun over the head. So people don't know after that, I think we got him out of the cage. Well, he was celebrating the first row or two on top of the chair. That's when Dr. Traub was taking care of his opponent Wesley in the cage. I knew there was a pretty bad knee injury by the way Dr. Traub was handling it. And Luis tried to go back into the cage to, be interviewed and receive his winning medal. And that's when I told Luis, and I brought security over, and I said, Luis is not going back in that cage after that fight. Wesley's still laying on the ground. He's got to find a way to get out of the cage. You had two different fan bases there, Luis and Wesley's, and based on words that were said or not said the night before at weigh-ins, I knew it was going to spill over in some way, shape, or form to the crowd. So I told security to take Luis upstairs. He's not coming back in the cage. I messaged him later. He didn't get paid that night. He didn't get his medal that night. I met him for lunch the next week, and we talked, and I gave him his money. I gave him his winning medal. I explained to him why I didn't allow him back in, because my number one concern was that Wesley would get out of there. Wesley would get in the ambulance, or his family would drive in the hospital. And I didn't think that was going to happen with Luis in the cage that night. And then I told Luis what I thought he did standing over him with the guns was excessive and not what we're looking for. He explained to me and showed me videos from the past, just like you said, Nate, where he has done that to past opponents. He'll go to his side of the wall and he'll shoot his gun over to them. And that's his way of being like Tito Ortiz, saying, I shot you, I killed you, this fight's over, you're done with, I finished you. Doing it from opposite sides of the cage is different than standing right over the man doing it. That's two completely different things, in my opinion. But he also showed me he had it ready on his phone to show me other UFC fights. I remember he showed me one guy that just butt humped the other guy at the end of the fight. He choked him out or whatever. He got behind him and he was butt humping him. And he's like, how is what I did worse than that? And I had no defense to say it's not worse, but you stand over a guy and you put bullets in his head. It's not going to end peacefully. It's just not going to. Well,
it was a moment in NFC history, and I think we just have to appreciate it for what it was. We hope that, we want to curb enthusiasm, but we want to get rid of it. Is that fair? Because
I agree. Like Nate said, these guys have personalities. There's the one time to shine, and we need to give them every opportunity in the world to shine. But we also have to think of the other guy that might have been, that came in second place, and make sure that second place guy can get out of there peacefully and safely. So
they were joking. They were joking that my man caught 2 L's that night.
Let's keep it honest, though. Like, it takes a different kind of person to want to get in the cage and get in a fist fight with another grown adult. Like, those are going to be characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not everybody
don't disagree. I did it versus Germonte, right?
That's not really a fight. You did it.
That was 2 grown men fighting on a jiu-jitsu mat for the pleasure of 1,000 people watching.
That was one grown man and another guy who didn't really know jiu-jitsu, but hey.
Which one was I? Was I the grown man or the one that didn't know the jiu-jitsu?
A little bit of both.
Yeah, I was going to say that categorizes both of us there.
Yeah, a little bit of both.
And Julian's camera is out because his thing overheats. He can still hear us.
I'm right here.
He'll click on in a second. Yeah, he can hear us and see us.
I'm the last guy on when everybody's asleep. So, yeah, his computer is probably a little hot.
Which do you enjoy? Enjoy more? Referee and jiu-jitsu, MMA, Muay Thai, or now pro boxing?
I love MMA. It's always been my passion. Like I said, I started training around 2000. I've been at some of the very first MMA shows in Georgia when they were in the back of a Mexican restaurant on Jimmy Carter Boulevard in a wooden ring. I'll always love MMA as my top passion. I mean, that's the thing I love the most, and that'll always be my first choice.
And we talked about Blake Grice's ABC class earlier, how you guys are required to take his class every 2 years, or an equal class, Big John McCarthy, whoever else teaches them. I've suggested the head trainer of every gym must also take those classes. That way they know what you guys are looking for as a referee, looking for as a judge, and they know how to translate that down to their students. What are your thoughts? Should trainers be required to take a class?
I mean, I wouldn't say they should be required, but they absolutely should take a class. I think there was a couple trainers at the last one that has definitely helped them as a coach and be able to coach their MMA fighters. And Blake Grice does an excellent class. I mean, I've taken John McCarthy's class before. I've taken the Gerald class before, which he's John McCarthy's top guy. I've taken one of his classes before, and Blake's right up there with anybody, if not has a better class. He spends more time. It's very informational. I think anybody that's involved with MMA should take that course just for the knowledge of knowing what everyone looks for, what's legal, what's illegal. And I think it definitely would help them be better coaches in the long run. Yes.
Taking classes like that, is that a good opportunity for you to continue to like meet and bond with other referees?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's not really a lot of time to bond because, I mean, it's such intense information and a short amount of time. But really at the shows, you kind of bond with referees, you talk to them, you get to know them. Mostly at that shows, people are just there to learn and kind of go about their day. But
Jimmy Neely mentioned earlier that refs are territorial, man. Have you seen that in your time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe when I was coming up, I might have been a little bit too. I mean, it's something that you work hard towards. Like, I was a judge for many years. I was a inspector for many years. Like, you kind of put your time in. So it is hard to see somebody come and try to kind of push you off the pedestal, so to say. Like, that is a kind of a hard thing to swallow sometimes. So I can see how that definitely leads into it with the amount of years and dedication that people put into trying to get to that position.
I appreciate your honesty on that answer, man. Now just speaking more about accountability and how we can make judging and refereeing better. Are you a proponent of open scoring?
That's a tough call. I mean, it goes both ways. The fighter that's up could get off the gas pedal and it could be a boring fight. It's a tough call. But, I mean, ultimately, I like the way it is now.
That's the old school fighter in you?
Yeah, just not knowing,
Did you watch this Patty the Batty fight this past weekend?
I did not.
Okay, I was going to ask you how you scored that because, Jared Gooden did go to the corner and ask what the scores were. And it just immediately, when he asked, immediately thought, like, it would be cool if there was open scoring so people could see what's going on. Because I think in his head, he thought he was winning the fight. And so I guess he just went for control that round. So I could see what you're saying, too. If fighters do know, they're going to fight differently.
Yeah, and with that fight and all the controversial fights that people say, oh, so and so got robbed, you got to go back and look at the rules and then maybe rewatch that fight, looking at the rules. You know what I mean? Effectiveness, efficiency, damage, duration, domination. So go look at the rules and then maybe rewatch the fight and judge it minute by minute instead of a lot of people sit at home. I might be answering some text, So it's hard to really sit there and judge the fight like the judges that are sitting there ringside.
I thought we should do some kind of potentially a podcast or whatever during a UFC fight. Kind of like when you watch Monday Night Football, you see Peyton Manning and Eli Manning on the ESPN sub channel, and they're talking and making jokes throughout the whole game and how they'd coach it and what they do different or whatnot. I've always thought if we did some kind of UFC pay-per-view party that we did as a podcast and had a referee or a judge scoring each round and telling you what they see, it might help educate people. And I think people would actually watch us.
So I actually did a little bit of training with all the judges during it wasn't really training, but basically we got together in a Zoom call. We watched close fights that were close. We talked about it. We talked about it with the criteria. We talked about it with the rules, and we kind of discussed how each person judged that fight in order to get clarity on the rules and clarity on judging. But those weren't very well attended. People were invited and they didn't show up. So,
and I'm even talking more so fans, not like the current officials. I'm talking about if we did it and fans could watch yourself or Blake or whoever it might be. I think fans might find that entertaining to say, I didn't even know you score it that round. If we just looked at that round by itself, what fans would think of that.
Well, we try to do it with officials. I think we invited a couple fighters and coaches, and nobody really showed up except for the officials. So.
Well, even with the people that did show up and did participate in that, man, did y'all have like a similar idea about the way that y'all looked at the fight? Or is this just like people just look at fights differently and score them differently in their head?
No, so we pull the rules up. Everything's based on the rules, how the judging rules should apply. And we talk about the fights with that scope. Yeah, people are gonna see things different. You're gonna see damage different than what I might see damage, but we try to have some consistency in the judging. I think most judges train jiu-jitsu right now, so they know what they're doing. It's not just just people you pluck off the street. They've trained. So I think in Georgia, people might not agree with some decisions, but you got really solid officials in the state of Georgia.
As the announcer, do you think it would be beneficial for us to be able to just relay to the audience the rules?
I think during that time, man, people are drinking. They don't want to hear it. I think it would be a tough sell.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking, if everybody did have an understanding of the rules, we might be able to come to a better understanding of how we're scoring or judging a fight. I think that's what I'm getting at.
Maybe Nate can correct me, but I think in MMA, if we did that, the rule set is 25 pages long. In jiu-jitsu, I contained it to a one-page PDF. At one point in time, I think I put the rule set on the program, like the back of the program everyone gets at the front door. It turns out when people get shit-faced, they don't know how to read very well. So even the PDF of the rules are right in front of them. After they've had 8 Bud Lights, they don't know how to read and they're not paying attention.
Would it just be fair if we just say, hey,
they don't listen very well either.
These fights are judged on damage, duration, and what was the other D?
They ain't gonna listen to you.
But just even if we just kept it at those 3, does that kind of give people a fair idea about how we're looking at a fight?
Not
give
really.
us a good basis, a baseline of what we're looking at.
I don't think so.
Fascinating.
But judging's not easy. There's close fights, and it's not an easy gig sometimes.
Definitely not.
We asked the other guys, how far do you want to go? How far do you want to go as a referee or judge? What is your ultimate?
Obviously, everybody tells you they want to ref in the UFC, but that's a very small community. I'm honestly happy reffing in Georgia. I get to do some big shows here, and I'm very grateful for that. I've done
You're welcome.
I've done ESPN boxing. I've done Bellators. I've done LFAs. I've done PFLs.
NFCs.
Yeah, I've done a couple of NFCs, which that's cool and all, but I've done a lot, and I'm happy where I am, and I enjoy reffing here in Georgia.
Indeed, and we enjoy always having you, man.
And then what is your full-time gig out there? Everyone else told us what they do for a living.
So I'm kind of a nerd. I'm the senior business operations and strategic manager for the College of Engineering at Kennesaw State. So I kind of have a nerdy job a little bit. So it's nice to break out and ref some MMA fights.
And I don't want to deny showing his message. Lady Bree commented both on YouTube and here. Said, I comment on YouTube, but I was not the first match for Quentin. Elmore filled in the first time. Also, Clay's a bitch. I challenged him to a match at least 3 times, and he denied it every time. If you're watching, Lady Bree, I don't even know. And I'm not being rude when I ask you, but what are we calling you these days? I really don't know because I see Brianna Morningstar here, and you commented on another one, Lady Bree MMA fighter. So if you wouldn't mind commenting again, I haven't talked to you in a while, and let us know what you are being called these days. And I don't mean that in a rude way. I mean that in a way I'm actually asking you. And are you ever going to fight again? I don't know if you're going to return and fight. I know you fought in Tennessee. You had a gig with us for the NFC, got injured. And then I think did he fight in Tennessee before or after that? I don't really know, Nate.
I don't remember.
I don't remember. So he said it's, hey, let me show this. Hey, David, it's Brianna or Bree. Okay, I didn't know that. So I guess it's Brianna or Bree. So now we know.
Shout out
to
Bree
you're going to fight again
for tapping in again. I think that's good for the NFC that we have just different characters and different people that are willing to call out other people and just continue to keep that dialogue going. Just like
I think we bring Bree on a future show. He just said no, I'm retired. But I think we get Bree on the next podcast. So Bree, let us know if you want to come on next Monday at 7. Love to talk to you and see what you're doing these days. And a lot of people don't know you are an OG in MMA and jiu-jitsu. You've been around a hell of a long time, owned your own gym. So yeah, I think people find that entertaining.
Indeed. Northside Nate, man, before we part ways today, what do you want to leave us in the NFC community?
Man, just thanks for letting me be a part of everybody's journey. I've seen people make it to the biggest stages, and I've seen them when they started out. So it's just great to see, great to be a part of, and I appreciate, everybody allowing me to do it, all the way from the commission to the fighters.
My last follow-up to that, do you have a favorite fighter that you've seen grow? And they can be retired if you just want to be fair,
Clay Bennett. Clay Bennett's my favorite MMA fighter.
Shout out to Clay. Shout out to Lady Bree. Shout out to Northside Nate. Thank you for joining us here on NFC Now, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Os.